This is Six Tackles with Gus, with Matthew Thompson and Gus Gould.
Hello, welcome to Six Tackles with Gus. Round 16 coming up. It is Beanies for Brain Cancer round. Every cent raised from the sale of the Mark Hughes Foundation Beanies goes towards research into brain cancer and the treatment and care of brain cancer patients. It is one of the great rounds of the season. A bit of Origin wash-up. We've got the Warriors training as we record at Mount Smart Stadium. Great scenes there. Latrell comes back for South. Six-tackle trivia. Some Ask Gus. Hello, Gus. The first question I've got for you is from Guy on Ask Gus, who says, how many kilometres did you travel covering rep round?
A lot. Where was I? I was at Leichhardt Oval Thursday night for the women's and boys under 19s. I was in Canberra Friday night. I had a couple of appointments in Wollongong on the Saturday morning very early, and then I came back to call the Fiji game on Saturday night, and then it was off to Perth for the big Origin match. Back on the 6 o'clock flight on Monday morning so we could get back to do some work, and then 100% footy, and then virtually collapsed on Tuesday.
Did you?
Well, I got a bit done yesterday, but it was a good night's sleep last night. First one in a while.
Yeah, good on you.
Yeah. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Congratulations on your Origin call, mate. That was an outstanding coverage and a great call too with you and the team. So
thank you.
Well done.
Well, I got the biggest one to come yet.
Yeah, you have. Well, it was big the other night. It was big for New South Wales, and you could tell early in the game. I felt that, that series scoreline was in their heads. I think that 1-0 thing was, and the fact that there were no tomorrows if they lost that game, did a little bit to them in the first 20 minutes, 30 minutes of the game.
To New South Wales, you mean?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. And I think once they settled down, though, it became apparent that they were very dominant, and it was a great second half. And I think in the second half, the 1-0 lead in the series actually ate into Queensland's resolve a little bit, and knowing that they had that third game up their sleeve in Brisbane. So, game 2 is always difficult. It's game 3 will be an absolute cracker. It'll be a different story up there.
Yeah, a chance for New South Wales to join only 2 other Blues teams to have won an Origin decider at Suncorp. You coached one in 1994, and in 2005, that was the famous series where Joey came back and inspired the Blues in Game 2 to victory to keep it alive. I'm wondering, though, Gus, given it's at Suncorp, does momentum count for anything, Game 2 to Game 3, or do you start from scratch again?
Oh, yes and no. Look, there are a lot of factors that go into this, particularly in the mental build-up. But by the time it gets around to game time, none of the results in Game 1 or 2 mean anything. Really, it's just a one-game race now for the series. It's a 3-game series, and invariably it gets down to a decider. And what you learn out of Games 1 and 2, tactically and from a football perspective, will certainly have an impact in the preparation, but the results of those games will mean absolutely nothing. When they start at 0-0 in this game in Queensland will want to play their way and the way that they believe can win the game. And New South Wales now know not what to do and what gets them their best results, so it's going to be the best versus the best. This is the game. If you're in a 3-game series, as coaches and players, you should be peaking in Game 3. You've had 2 games to warm up to this. And, with a result apiece and now the Shield on the line, it should make for some, not desperation, but it should make for some brilliant football and great tactics from the 2 coaches. And, I think this one will go right down to the wire. I think Queensland is just a different animal. Origin is a different animal when it gets up there to Suncorp Stadium, the old Lang Park. And Billy Slater and those boys will be hurting by some of the things that happened in that second half the other day. There was some very un-Queensland-like defence in the last 20 minutes. They just pretty much pricked by a balloon late in the game, and that's not like Queensland, and that'll just be an extra source of motivation for them going in. So Game 3 promises to be everything that we expected from this series.
Yeah, I heard your comments on 100% footy. And we actually mentioned last week that the safety blanket of Game 3 sometimes is a factor for coaches in Origin, but it rarely drip feeds through to the players. Did we see that on Sunday night with Queensland?
I have no doubt. The game was interesting because at half-time, everything had sort of been in New South Wales' favour. They had all the field position and they were doing most of the attacking, yet only went to the break with a narrow lead and scored one of their tries against a 12-man Queensland side, where Queensland, on virtually 2 visits to the New South Wales end of the field, they didn't get much ball down there at all. Orchestrated a try to Kafusi. It was only a yard forward, but who's counting in Origin? And the other try was a brilliant try to Munster on the left-hand side of the field where they found some space out wide. And I just thought, well, they've clinically executed two attacking plays that have just left New South Wales stranded. If they get more ball in the second half, as much as New South Wales had in the first half, they've got points in them, and New South Wales had to be wary of that. Now, obviously, New South Wales knew that at half-time because their second half was all about yardage and getting out of your own half of the field and making sure you play the game at the other end of the field. They totally dominated Queensland in every aspect, in every statistic that you can muster there to explain what happened in the performance, and just didn't give Queensland a look in. Never gave them a look in. Queensland had their backs to their try line the whole time, and eventually it told. I think they only scored the one try while they're off for 12 men, but they made them work very hard during that period, which is a fatigue factor. And then the Tupu try where Cleary threw that ball up over the top and stretched the lead out, I think pricked the balloon. Then we saw in the sort of 58, 63rd, 66th minute, three extraordinary tries where Luai just dummied and went straight through them, and then Cleary twice dummied and went straight through them. And you can throw in the Crichton one where the two Crichtons, Crichton came back in field and ended up with Angus Crichton going over under the post. Very un-Queensland-like defence. And, whilst the individuals could never be accused of giving up, they probably all felt as though they were trying their best. What I say is sometimes the team gives up, and by that I mean they get isolated. They start thinking and talking to themselves rather than the man alongside of him. The grit and the resolve isn't there. It becomes every man for himself. And you don't often see that happen in Origin football, but it certainly happened to Queensland, and it was more likely to happen in that game as it happened in Perth a few years ago. When New South Wales got on top, well, okay, we've got the decider in Brisbane, and let's go. We'll get back to Brisbane and see if we can beat them there. And I do think that was a factor. They won't admit it, but it was definitely a factor in the second half. They got very isolated. They separated from each other. It wasn't a collective Queensland effort, which is what we anticipate from Queensland when they play Origin football. You will get that, as you saw it in Game 1 this year. The Queensland style of play is the grinding style of football to keep the scores close and to back their brilliance at the back end of the game. And if New South Wales get dragged into another contest like that, it's a lottery. If New South Wales can get to play the football they played in last game, well, then I think they're a little too talented for Queensland, but that won't mean much at Suncorp Stadium.
Strange to think, but just sort of reflecting on the game, Queensland missed Ruben Cotter, didn't they? That they looked to someone to do a Jake Trebojevic style job. I know he's only played one game, but he made 50-odd tackles in the first game. They'd love to have someone like him come back.
50-odd tackles and 18 or 20 runs. Who do you get to replace that?
They didn't really replace that, did they?
Well, they didn't. Yeah. They didn't really replace that. And on the other hand, the return of Jake Trebojevic to the New South Wales team gave them that real selfless, team-minded, hard-working, body-on-the-line type man in the middle of the field who just kept cutting people down. They weren't worried about wrestle tactics or locking up the ball or anything like that. Like Jake Trebojevic hits them one-on-one. He belts them and gets them down. And to me, that's defence. That's Origin football. And it wasn't as scientific as what it tried to be in Game 1. As I said, I thought New South Wales played more like a club brand of football in Game 1, and Queensland were able to stymie that game down into a bit of a grind and then score a couple of really brilliant tries down the short side to get the victory. And, of course, to try to Cherry Evans off the scrum base was a difference. But the other night, New South Wales were far more positive from the back of the field. It's not easy to play what we call transition football. In club football, there's a lot of penalties and six agains, and you kind of get out of trouble easily. It's about having everyone on the attack all the time, so everyone gets their equal opportunity. But in Origin, when you go to what we call transition football, the only football you get is from the opposition kicks. You can bog down and struggle with your attacking game. Now, the other night, the New South Wales back five were far more proactive in what they were doing at their own end of the field. And in fact, every kick, when Tedesco caught the ball or a winger caught the ball, he had two or three players ready to receive it on the outside, if not on that tackle, certainly on the next play as well. And that just ran Queensland around a little bit, and then that gave Cleary and Luai and these fellas a little bit more scope through the middle of the field, and they really tore them apart. A brilliant performance by New South Wales, one of the great masterclass halfback Origin performances from Nathan Cleary. He was well supported. It's never a one-man band, but I go back through history and the great halfbacks that have played Origin football and some of their greatest moments or greatest periods in the game. And that second half from Nathan Cleary is up there amongst the top echelon that have ever played Origin football, as with that number 7 jersey on. And you got to remember too, like he's still only a young boy. He's got his best of his career well in front of him. And he's going to graduate into one of the all-time great Origin players. I've got no doubt about that. Yep. When they took him at a young age, they actually rang and said, well, we're thinking of Cleary. And I remember at the time I said, well, two reasons. One, if you keep him, you've got to give him 3 to 5 years to settle into it. And two, you've got to take James Maloney with him, because James was sort of mentoring at Panthers at the time. and thankfully they did both, and they persevered with Nathan, and he's an extraordinary kid. That boy deserves every little bit of his success that the game gives him, or that he earns. He earns every little bit of it. One of the most dedicated young professional sportsmen that you'll ever meet, and he deserves it all, and extremely humble with it as well. He took the game one loss hard, and he took it personally, which I don't think he was entitled to do, but he took it personally, and that's what the great ones do, and he took it upon himself to turn that around. As I said, the first little bit of the Origin game, I felt we were a little bit frantic and maybe thinking we had to get it over early, or could we bust them early and break their spirit. It didn't happen. Queensland, to me, at halftime were right in the contest and still into it when Kaufusi got back on the field. They only scored one try while he was off, but that extra bit of workload told, and New South Wales were just brilliant in the second half. The kicking game, there was a couple of early kicks from Cleary in particular, one from the right-hand side of the field where he attempted a 40-20 back on the left that sort of got picked up just inside the corner post, and I think 2 tackles later they dropped the ball and it resulted in a try. And there was another early chip kick that had the defence a little bit in two minds, and they got Ponga caught dead in goal for another line drop out, and that led to a try. But there were some wonderful moments as well where he ran the ball, and as I say, he came up with 2 tries from dummies, and Queensland will be ready for that next game. New South Wales will have to be better again, but they should be. It's game 3. Brilliant coaching performance too. We spoke to Brad Fittler on 100% footy the other night, and there are many factors go into a win. You can say a team won because, and everyone has a different thing as the major factor. I said to Brad Fittler, I said, away from the field, the thought of going over to Perth on the Monday. So they picked their team on the Sunday night, they got on a plane and went to Perth straight away. I said, how advantageous was it to your preparation to do that? Because Queensland didn't go till Thursday, remember. And I'm not criticising what Queensland did. I'm just asking what New South Wales benefit got out of it. And he said, well, the weather was warm, we had great training facilities, and it was really relaxed. He said, we were over there for a number of days. He said, it might only seem like a little thing, 2 hours time difference, but when we first got there the first 3 mornings, we're all waking up at 4 a.m, which is 6 a.m. Sydney time, which is what our players usually do when they're going to work with their club side. So your body clock is, only takes a couple of hours, and you've got to think what that feels like at 8 o'clock at night at kick-off time. If you're getting up at 4 a.m, no one feels like doing anything at 8 o'clock at night. So to get their body clocks in tune, and he said our best night's sleep was the night before. They monitor all this sort of stuff. They monitor their sleep habits and how they went. And through the first couple of days, it was a little bit, frantic. But the training, the sleep habits, the good food, and then by the time they got to the night before the game, the Saturday night, everyone recorded their best sleep of the night the next morning, and they were up ready to go at 8 o'clock at night. And if you think about that, the game's not ending till 9:30, 10 o'clock. So if you're up at 4 a.m, and that's your body clock, and it's 10 o'clock at night, well, not many people play, so it was hard. I'm not saying that Queensland got it wrong either, but it was interesting that New South Wales finished so full of running and Queensland didn't. The coaching, the courage and the commitment of his, the convictions to make all those changes and back their ability of the players to bring it all together in the space of 6 days preparation. Under pressure of being one down in the series was a brilliant coaching performance and wonderful playing performance by the players. The players win the Origin games, but the coach certainly did his job on this occasion.
Matt Burton, one of the great taboos too in Origin. He was phenomenal for the Blues. So you'd never advise Queensland on anything, I know. So I'll put this to you in a generic term. If you were preparing a team to play a deciding Origin game that's been beaten by 32 points in the fashion that you saw on Sunday night, where would you start?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like I say, out of the first 2 games, there are things to be learned, strengths and weaknesses. And Origin history, I've said this many, many, many times, the team that loses learns more out of the game than the team that wins. What I said about Queensland in Origin 1, if they live off that euphoria of beating New South Wales in Sydney, and it's a short preparation into Game 2, and if their minds aren't out of Game 1 yet, and Game 2 is just going to be a continuation, we'll pick up where we left off last week, then they'll be in a little bit of trouble. The losers always learn something. New South Wales did. They made a number of changes to their play. They made a number of changes to their player roster. Queensland was kind of like just a continuation, and maybe they didn't learn as much out of Game 1 as they should have. Or maybe they didn't anticipate what New South Wales might do in reaction. So if I sit down with any Origin game, be it a winning game or a losing, or any club game or that sort of thing, I don't look necessarily at what happened, or you do. You look at the events that happened. I look at what might have happened or what could have happened had there been an extra pass or an inside pass, or had they come from a different point. And there was a number of things in that game where could have been potentially more dangerous for New South Wales that didn't eventuate, that New South Wales have to be ready for. And there are a number of times that New South Wales could have threatened a little bit more with one extra pass or one extra push in support or one extra sort of little decoy run there that might have made the difference. And that's where I look at. I look predominantly at what could have happened, not necessarily what did happen, because they might be ready for what did happen next time. They might be ready for what we ran at them next time. So how do we vary that in getting across the other way? Queensland came up with a really good play earlier in the game, a switch of ruck, where they brought Munster back on the inside across the other side of the play, and they all swept around to a short side. And I was sitting with Fatty on the panel. So that's a good play. That's, they've seen something from game one that could have happened, and they exploited it in game two. It nearly got New South Wales. But I think my advice to those is to look at what could have happened. Don't just necessarily look at what happened. What could have happened? So from an attacking standpoint or a defensive standpoint, not what happened, but what could have happened and how can we improve on it. And that's where you look. The score's gone. It's over. All right. At the start of the series, they said we're going to have a decider in Brisbane. You'd be really happy about that. At the start of the series, you say, okay, well, that's about where we thought it was going to be. We could ignore the first two games and just get out there and play the decider. There is a lot to learn for Queensland out of that loss. And the challenge for New South Wales is what can they learn out of the win? What can they anticipate Queensland will change? What will Queensland do differently? What could have happened to this had Queensland been a little bit better at this? Because next time they will. So that you're not looking to accommodate what you've seen, you're looking to accommodate what you haven't seen. Because that's what they'll be trying to do to you. So there's a lot of learning. Losing teams usually learn the most. They really do. And I'm sure Queensland will learn a lot out of that loss. It's up to Brad Fittler and his players now to learn something from the win. And by the time we get to Sunday night, who's say the suspensions and injuries haven't changed for 2 or 3 key positions again, and they've got to get ready for another full preparation. Although it'll be a 10-day preparation this time, they should be ready both sides, and it's exciting. Orange is always exciting when it gets down to a decider, and Queensland, as you say, in history, how long have we been going? 42 years, 43 years of Origin football. There's only been 2 teams that have won a decider at Suncorp Stadium, Lang Park, and that's for a reason, because Queensland are at their best up there. And for those fellas that have, think you've experienced Origin so far, they haven't seen the real beast until they run out there on Suncorp Stadium.
Yeah. Oh well, it's wonderfully poised. It really is. It's been a wonderful lead up to both Origin games so far. Pleased to report too, we got over 3 million viewers on Sunday night for I think it's the highest rating Origin since 2019. So congratulations to all the team here. And I reckon that we might knock that one off too for Game 3 at Suncorp Stadium. It's so funny how things work. Had Jack White not have got COVID, Matt Burton wouldn't have played.
Maybe.
Probably. But
maybe. He might have been brought in at 14, you don't know.
But isn't it just amazing how things work? Like everyone's talking about.
You ever seen the movie Sliding Doors?
Yeah, it's Sliding Doors, isn't it?
My whole life has been sliding doors.
Really?
Sliding doors all the way through my whole life. I think everyone's life is. What's happened and what could have happened. I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't change anything for quids. I wouldn't change one day of my life.
Wouldn't you?
No. I'm very happy the way it is. And if there is reincarnation, I want to come back as myself. I don't want to come back as a bird or
a bird.
Elephant or
I'd like to come back as you, actually.
No, you wouldn't.
Wouldn't I?
You wouldn't handle it.
I don't know many that would. I don't know many that would. So it's just the wonderful uncertainty of sport.
But he was brilliant, Matt Burton, as you know,
so good.
As we all.
It's like he was born to play it.
Well,
he might have
I'll show you a text message I sent him when he was first elected, and I said you were born to play at this level.
Oh,
don't fear it, just embrace it.
What about that kick? Oh.
Yeah, highest bomb. It was incredible. I had a player many years ago called Andrew Walker who used to be able to fire him out of a cannon. He could kick long and he could kick high, and we developed these spiral attacking kicks that he was brilliant at. He could pinpoint them to any point on the field. And in the early stages of Nathan Cleary's development, we worked very hard on different kick options and things that he needed to practice. And when Matt Burton came to the Bulldogs, he hadn't been playing in playmaker positions for 3 years. He hadn't played 5'8" virtually since he was 18, not regularly anyway. And I said that you've got a great kicking game, but you need to get it ready to stand up under pressure. And we looked at all the types of kicks, his long kickoffs, his short line dropouts, his long line dropouts, his 40-20s, his field goals, his goal kicking, and the bombs, the kicks downfield for field position, the high kicks with hang time so we could get down as a defensive unit, or the ones that we could really put pressure on the opposition in the backfield with those long spiral kicks. And I thought, maybe 2 or 3 off seasons it would take him to perfect it all. He did it in 2 or 3 months. He's an exceptional talent, an exceptional talent. And I said, well, I remember sitting at training there one day every afternoon. Jimmy Jones, the recruitment manager, I used to sit out and watch the junior reps train. We used to sit under the trees in the shade and with the cockatoos, and he'd tell me about where all the kids came from and everything. And Matt Burton used to train without a headgear because he was always in that headgear, and so it was not easy for an old bloke to pick up at the other end of the field. And he threw this brilliant pass. I said, please tell me that was Burton. He said, that was Matty Burton. And he said to me, what do you think? And I said, Jimmy, I think he might be the best of the lot, which was a big statement at 18 years of age. And he's got a long way to go, but he's an exceptional talent and a wonderful young man, and thoroughly deserves his call-up and everything he got out of game one. And he's so even-tempered too. Like, he's so, he'll take all that in his stride and won't be affected by the attention that he's getting and the media that he's getting at the moment. It's part of what he's going to have to deal with for the rest of his career, because he's got a long and successful career in front of him.
Yes, well, it's going to be interesting with the Bulldogs, because you might have the NFL knocking on your door soon. How are you going to go with that?
Geez, you can think of things to worry about.
Well, Hector on Ask Gus says, fans hoping you take up the Matt Burton option and taking up Burton option in his contract. I don't even know if you've got one, but I'm assuming Hector seems to think you do. Sign him up for $1 million a season, Gus.
Is that
there
all?
You go.
$1 million, eh?
Yep.
Okay, there was plenty of advice out there.
All right. We've analysed Origin back to front, inside out. Jono on Ask Gus. Who's the best player to never play Origin? What a good question.
Yeah, there are a few, and I won't remember them all, but from my own personal standpoint, the player I just referred to, Andrew Walker, I think could have easily handled the Origin arena and been... he was such an individual player. He wasn't someone that we loaded up with a lot of game plans and strategies and shapes and plays, and we I'd get our players to throw the ball to him at a certain time in a certain way, and he would just weave his own magic with it. He had a brilliant kicking game, and he was a tough kid too. He was one of my all-time favourites in Andrew Walker, and I think
dual international.
Yeah, he played for the Wallabies.
Yeah, he played
for the Wallabies.
He
played for Australia in a Prime Minister's 13 up there in Papua New Guinea, but not in an Origin side. So I'd finished coaching Origin at the end of '96, and his prime in rugby league here, I think, was probably about '96 through about 2000, and when he went off to rugby with the Wallabies. And I was actually invited down by Eddie Jones to speak to the Brumbies that year in pre-season, because I'd asked Eddie to take Andrew Walker into his confidence down there at the Brumbies, and they invited me down to talk to the Brumbies and to also watch Andrew train. And he sort of, Andrew was the kind of kid at training who just float in and out and do his own thing and watch what the team was doing and all that. And then on game day, he provided the X factor. He did something extraordinary, and it happened to them down there because the rugby angles and their plays are a lot different to rugby league, and they all tended to fan out and play sideways a little bit. And then in the first game that season that I saw the Brumbies play, they went for this same play off a scrum base, and all of a sudden Andrew Walker come running back at a sharp, hard outside-in angle and virtually compelled the man inside to hand him the ball with a pass that went 6 inches, and he screamed through this hole and went over under the post. Now, he hadn't done that at training all summer. They hadn't seen that before, but that's just what he saw out of instinct and created a brilliant try from that, and he ended up in the Wallabies team, dual international. And he's still doing great things, Andrew. He's up there in Queensland, a place called Fassifern was the last time I spoke to him, and he runs an Indigenous academy up there for Indigenous boys, and every afternoon he puts on social media he's playing touch football down the park. Anyone can come down and play with him who they like, and
really
he looks after them. Yeah, he rode a bike from Ipswich to Alice Springs or something or other and back, and some big bike ride he did to raise money for cerebral palsy, which his son Dylan had suffered from as a young man, and he's done wonderful things in the community. He is one of the great success stories out of rugby league, and a shame that he didn't play Origin.
Good answer. Did you ever try and sign anyone from rugby?
I did. Ryan Cross.
Oh, yeah, of course you did.
Peter Jorgensen.
Yeah.
Darren Junee.
Darren Junee. Yeah.
Might even have one shortly.
Oh, that's a teaser. Care to say any more?
No.
Okay.
That's more than I should have said.
Yeah, it is actually. Because now Danny Wilder's going to be calling you when he hears this. Mitchell Hall has asked, what's the biggest spray you've ever heard from a coach?
Oh, I've heard some beauties. Why?
That's an Ask Gus.
I say to people, you only get one spray. If you're good at it, only do it once all year.
Well, that was your theory.
Yeah.
I don't think every coach subscribes to that, do they?
No, they don't. And it has less and less effect the more you do it, particularly if you're losing. But
got any highlights?
Highlights, nothing that readily comes to mind.
Mustn't have been much of a spray then.
Eh?
Well, mustn't have been much of a spray
no,
then.
I saw the best of them.
Yeah. Who was the best blow-up merchant that you had as a coach?
As a coach, blow-up merchant. No, I was pretty lucky. I didn't have... My coaches in first grade, Don Parrish back at Penrith, who was a very calm and if Don tried to blow up, it would look funny because it just wasn't him. And then I went to Warren Ryan at Newtown. Now Warren Ryan, he didn't blow up.
He was calculated.
But he was incisive. Like he would tear through you with a comment. Sometimes only just with a look. Sometimes he'd just say to you, "You're intelligent. You work it out." He didn't have to say much, but he could deliver. He could deliver his point very, very succinctly. George Piggins. George never blew up. George was a fiery character. Like you could have an argument with George, but he never really blew up at the team, nor did he have reason to. The 1 year I was at South, he had a very successful period. Had a reserve grade coach, Tony Charlton, who I always rated Tony Charlton. He was a good friend of Warren Ryan's, and I played a fair bit of reserve grade football under Tony, and he was a very underrated coach and a great bloke too. But he never really blew up.
All right, what's the best spray or the most memorable one you gave?
I don't think I gave a lot of sprays. I was pretty forceful at half-time in the 91 grand final. I think those players will tell you that I was pretty forceful there. But
what'd you say?
It's kind of between me and them, I think.
Oh.
But it sort of got down to the point at the end of it all. At the end of the, because I came in and it was a brilliant game, and it was. I think they let us 12-6 at half time. They scored a couple of tries and nearly scored another one. Freddie saved, and it was all very entertaining. And that's what I said. I came into the point. I said, well, that was entertaining. The TV's happy and the fans are happy and everyone's really enjoying this. But what about settling down and playing the football that we're supposed to be playing? I mean, and I didn't say it in those terms. It was much more harsh terms than that.
Yeah.
But it was kind of making the point, what do you think you're doing? This is not us, and this is not what we've trained for, and this is not how we wanted to play the Canberra Raiders, and we're playing right into their hands, and they're such a brilliant attacking team. And if you want to keep going on doing this, you're going to be in the same place you were 12 months ago, sitting in the middle of the stadium at full time, crying your eyes out because you've stuffed another grand final, and we'll just be like every other team in history that's, couldn't handle the pressure of the big time. And we sort of spoke along those lines. I said, the beauty is that we were here exactly 12 months ago to this day. We were down 12-6 at half-time against the Raiders. We got beaten 18-14. But 12 months ago, we were in the exact same position, exact score. We were down 12-6 at half-time, playing the Canberra Raiders, even running the same way that we were. And I said, if you've learnt anything in the last 12 months, now's the time to do it. Now's the time to do it. And it was also going to be Royce Simmons' last game, and we sort of put our hands on his shoulders just before they left the dressing room and promised that we would give all we had for that second half. We got down to 12 men with Mark Guy, got sin bin. This is all reliving a lot of history that the people out there won't remember, I don't think. But it was probably the most perfect 40 minutes of football for that era that I'd ever seen any team. And when you think about all the stars in that Queensland, in that Canberra side, it was one of the great club sides of all time. And we beat them 13-0 in the second half to get Panthers' first ever premiership. But it was probably one of the more harsher half-time lectures that I'd got, but I saved it for a good day.
Yeah, you did.
Not that I'm saying the lecture won the game. It was just a realisation, okay, we never left a stone unturned. From the time we lost that grand final, I remember when we lost the grand final the year before, you get a silver medal, Yes. Second always gets a silver medal. And I actually pulled them into a huddle in the middle of the stadium, and I said, we'll come back in 12 months' time and swap this for a gold one. I said, I promise you. And we never left a stone unturned for the whole game. And even though we never cut a corner, we never left one stone unturned. We won the minor premiership by 8 points. But even then, we were down 12-6 at half-time against the best side, one of the best club sides in history. And had we cut a corner, or had we shaved our measures in any way, then we couldn't have won that competition. That's how hard they are to win, particularly in that era, because Canberra went to grand finals. They won in 89, they won in 90, they were beaten narrowly in 91, they won again in 94. It was a great era for the Canberra Raiders, but the Panthers were right up there amongst them. It was a very underrated side, the Panthers, around that era, and a great group of blokes. And that was probably the harshest half time I ever gave.
Wasn't there one where you broke your foot? Didn't you kick a bucket or something? And there was full of beers?
It was actually that was actually earlier that year, because or it was the year before. No, it was the year before, 1990, the first year I got there, and we had Canberra had just played Brisbane in the game of the century. They called it the game of the century up there at Lang Park, and we were playing Canberra in Canberra the next week. We had a lot of injuries, and there were different blokes, and we took the week off work and trained. But the previous week we played, I can't remember who we played. We had a win, but we weren't that impressive. So after the game, I'm making the strong point that if we go out and deliver that rubbish next week, Canberra will they'll rip us this and do this and do that. We can't be going down. I'm sick of this. You keep, doing this. So anyway, and I thought for a fact there was a big bucket of ice in the middle of the dressing room. I thought I'll just kick this bucket and the ice will go everywhere and I'll storm out and this will be very theatrical. When I kicked the bucket of ice, it had 4 dozen beer cans in it and didn't budge. I broke my toe. And they just pissed themselves laughing. I thought it was the funniest thing they've ever seen. Anyway.
Did you grit your teeth? I
grit my teeth. And then it became very funny. Gus had a blow-up. But we beat the Raiders next week. So
good stuff.
Everything for effect. Everything for theatre.
All right, we've got a club round of footy coming up. We've got some other stuff to talk about as well. On the way to our little break, our six-tackle trivia for this week. I mentioned the two teams for New South Wales that have won deciding games in Suncorp. 2005 and 1994 when your New South Wales team won the decider, Gus, after the coin miracle try at the football stadium in Game 1, 16-12. New South Wales Game 2, 14-0 at the MCG. Game 3, 27-12. Who was the man of the match? And if you think back to the score sheet from that game, something peculiar stands out. Can you pinpoint what that is?
Look back to the score sheet. There is a particular thing that stands out. Can you pinpoint that is?
That is our question. We'll take a break and see whether the Gusmeister can continue his rich vein of form in six-tackle trivia. Game 3, 1994. New South Wales 27 defeated Queensland 12. Who got man of the match? Let's start with the more straightforward of the two.
Well, from what they say when you have memory, you don't really remember the event. You remember the last time you remember it.
Okay.
So you virtually edit your own highlights reel out of different things that have happened in your life. You're not actually remembering that moment. You're remembering the last time you remembered it.
Right.
So when I think of that game, I think of the leadership of Laurie Daly, who was absolutely brilliant. I think scored an extraordinary try in the first half, but and he was someone that could probably win a man of the match. I think Bradley Clyde played in that game as well, who was absolutely outstanding. Lazarus would have been in that team as well, and he's one that can compile votes. Benny Elias's, Brad Fittler played in the centres. He played halfback. Ricky Stewart. I could have gone to any number of them. Whoever beat Laurie Daly for the man of the match must have been.
Do you want me to read the team to you? Would that help you?
Yeah.
Brasher, Eddinghausen, Fittler, McGregor, Mullins, Daly captain Stewart, Roberts, Elias, Harrigan, Siren and Pay, Clyde, Mackay, Chris Johns, Ken Nagus, David Barnhill.
It was before that game. We were at the hotel about ready to go, and Ian Roberts, I'd played Ian Roberts when his debut season was South. So I'd actually played with Ian, and he had a groin injury in Game 2 and didn't play, and we won 14-0. But I rang him up the next week, and I rang him personally. I said, are you ready to play this? He said, they went pretty good. I said, need you in the team, mate. I said, I've got a real job for you to do up there. And he said, I'll be there. I remember that conversation. And I remember seeing him in the foyer. And this is what it's like to be an Origin player, and people don't really appreciate. And he was one of the toughest players that I ever played with or saw play the game. He was standing in the foyer. He was all dressed up in his suit, ready to go to the game. And I walked past and said, how you going, mate? He said, I just want this over. I said, what do you mean? He said, I know it's going to hurt. I'm going to push myself to extraordinary limits. I don't care what happens to my body, but I want to get it over with. I just want to get out there and do it and get it over with. In other words, he knew, and this is what happens. They talk about Origin experience. Sometimes when you're a rookie, you don't know what you're in for and you aren't worried about it. It's the ones that do know what they're in for because you've experienced it before. You know how much it hurts and the pain you're going to have to go through. And he was playing under a little bit of duress at the time too. But I remember him saying, "I just want this over with." And I kind of went, "What do you mean?" He said, "I know how much it's going to hurt. I'm not going to back off. I'm going to push my body to extraordinary limits. I don't know what might happen to me, but I just want to get it on now and I want to get it over with so I can start repairing." And it was a really, really important mindset that I learned from a champion player like that. About
he was a real pro too, wasn't he?
Absolutely. Yeah. Mate, he was a young fella. He played his debut season in 1986 when I went to South. I'd never heard of him. And we're actually in the pre-season training. All they did was run up and round hills and stairs and round the Coogee stairs. And I saw every inch of Centennial Park. I never saw a football for 3 months when I went to South. And we just ran and ran and ran. And one day they brought out the football in Centennial Park to have a game of touch football. And I must have been playing on the other side of the team when I used to wear a gold chain. Pretty cool when I was a kid. And I was wearing this gold chain playing a touch football. And Ian Roberts didn't tag me. He grabbed the back of the gold chain and strangled me and broke my gold chain and sort of just looked at me and, sorry, and handed it back. Like, then I looked at him. He was towering over the top. I mean, he was a tough boy, big tough boy. A great footballer too. Look, in answer to your question, I'd find it hard to think that who handles the ball the most. Brasher, Laurie Daly, Ricky Stewart. I don't know. I'd say Laurie Daly.
The answer is Benny Elias.
Oh, another playmaker. Yeah.
And the peculiarity. Do you want me just to tell you?
What was it, 27-12? We didn't kick a first half field goal, did we? Is that the peculiarity? All the tries were scored by backs?
No.
No? What?
Your first answer is sort of somewhere near the mark.
Somewhere near the mark. First, I don't know.
You kicked 3 field goals.
Oh, did we? Okay.
27-12. He kicked 3 field goals.
Okay.
Elias kicked 2. Fittler kicked 1.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Well, only worth 1 point. Did they think we're going back to 2-point field goals? 3 field goals.
We're a fan of the field goal.
Well, the coach wasn't a fan of the field goal.
We must have been.
Benny Elias, he loved a shot at field goal.
Did we kick one in the first half? We must have.
Elias kicked a field goal in the second half to give New South Wales a comfortable buffer. 19-12. In what would be his final Origin match after 9 appearances, Elias kicked the second of 3 field goals 2 minutes from full time, so he just knocked one over for the sake of it. Now, where's Freddie's field goal? I'm looking through the match report here. Doesn't say. 3 field goals.
That was an extraordinary series, and it was the first time that a New South Wales side ever won a decider at Lang Park at Suncorp Stadium. And I remember that straight after the Mark Coyne miracle trial in Game 1, we'd been together for 3 years. We'd won 2 series in a row. We were looking to become the first New South Wales team to win 3 series in a row. And they were an extraordinary group of players, and we got beaten in the last minute. Queensland actually scored twice in the last 5 minutes of that game to beat us. Mark Coyne miracle try right on full time. We got into the dressing room. They're all sitting there pretty somber. And I said, well, not only will we be the first team to win 3 Origins in a row, we'll be the first team to win a decider at Lang Park. So I'd virtually jumped over Game 2 as though that was going to be a fait accompli. So I said to them, we'll be the first team to win a decider at Lang Park. And they all sort of slowly lifted their heads and said, yep, that's what we'll do. And the second game, we just totally blotted Queensland out of it down at the MCG. It was cold and it was slippery on the MCG surface, and it's a different ground, a different arena. We did what we had to do to totally blot them out of that. And then in Game 3, they just unleashed and put it beyond doubt early. We're never going to lose. But I remember that conversation distinctly. I think it was my first words to them when they came off after the Mark Coyne miracle try, because the heads were down and we'd sort of been gazumped in the last minute by Queensland, which they had a habit of doing. But my first comment was, not only will we be the first team to win 3 series in a row, we'll be the first team to win a decider at Lang Park. In other words, Game 2's won. It's won right now. We need to just make that happen and get on with Game 3. And they were very experienced and tough boys, those boys, and they just went about doing it. 14-0 in the second game and 27-12 in the third game, which was a big scoreline back in those days, 27-12. See bigger scorelines today, but that was a pretty big scoreline. 3 field goals, eh?
3 field goals.
Wow.
Footy time. So it is Beanies for Brain Cancer round, and if you haven't got your beanie, you can grab them at the ground, I'm pretty sure. Where else can we get them? IGA, they sell them at IGA. You can get them through the Mark Hughes Foundation website. You can even just make a donation. Now, I should mention, too, we've got the big 150K walk that is taking place for the Mark Hughes Foundation. We've got 3 people here at Wild Sports doing it. We've got Murray Conlon, who's our digital producer. Here we've got Emma Lawrence, who you see on the footy, and also Tom Belucci Hughes, who's one of our gun producers here. They're all 150 Ks, 50 Ks a day for 3 days back to back to back. How do you feel about that?
Brilliant.
Not happy?
Why?
How would you be?
What?
How would you be backing up 50 Ks 3 days in a row?
Ah,
Chafe? Sweet?
Yeah, sweet.
Sweet as a nut?
Yeah.
It's going to be sweet, Gus. So good luck. That started today. Interestingly, I noticed all 3 of those aforementioned people were at a farewell for one of our colleagues until quite late in the evening yesterday, so I don't know how they went starting at 5:30 this morning. Manly versus Melbourne to start round 16 at 4 Pines Park, Brookvale, the old Battle of Brookvale, the latest renewal. Now, a little bit of damage for the Seagulls. Josh Aloiai won't play. Playing for Samoa, he was concussed, and we're not sure if Munster's going to play because of the shoulder. They're saying he's touch and go. However, Ryan Pappenhausen is on the extended bench, and that would most likely mean he'll come in. So maybe one to drop out, maybe one to come in. Oh, and the other thing too is that Felice Kafusi's not playing. He's had a family issue. So Manly Melbourne back on again.
Yeah, very, very interesting game. Very interesting game.
Manly blew their last year. Manly, 3 tries in the last 7 minutes.
Well, up until the 72nd minute, it was a stellar performance, wasn't it, against a team that was really in red-hot form, the Cowboys. This is a hard one. This is really a hard one, particularly if we find that that Munster doesn't play and sort of Kafusi's not playing. Just looking through this Manly side, they've got the ability to... Oh, gee whiz, the answer's a pineapple. I don't know. I'm going to say Seagull.
Manly. Ooh. Yeah. Okay, upset to start the round. You'll see that Thursday night footy.
Old Des. I put a lot of trust in Des.
You do.
Old Desi.
I'll tell you, there's another bit of news out of this game. Paul Vaughton is going to be calling the game at Brookie.
Is he?
It's been a long time since the Fat's been to Brookvale.
Lovely.
Yeah. Salty and Fatty and someone else. I've got Thursday off, but I'm on deck Friday. But the Fat, back to Brookvale. They'll give him a guard of honour as he walks in the joint. They love him.
Mm-hmm.
Early game Friday. Another interesting one. This Newcastle versus Gold Coast Titans. To say these teams need a win would be an understatement. What's the star news? Well, the big news is, of course, that Kalen Ponga's out because of the concussion from Origin. Daniel Saifiti and Bradman Best are listed in the reserves and could return. David Fafita is back via the bench for his first game since round 12 for the Gold Coast.
They're my special of the weekend, the Gold Coast.
Ooh.
I think they'll be winning this one. Titans.
Special. Asterix for Gus. Friday night footy. Another great old rivalry, this one. Panthers versus the Roosters, 7:55 kickoff at Bluebet Stadium. All the Origin blokes named to back up for Penrith. Now, I'm just looking at the extended bench here to see if that gives us a window into what might happen. Now, Sean O'Sullivan's on the extended bench. That's cover for Nathan or Jerome Luai. Eisenhuth's there in case one of the forwards drop out. As far as the Roosters go, Luke Keary is out. So, Sam Walker and Drew Hutchison will play in the halves. They do get Victor Radley back.
Panther by a lot.
Bulldogs versus Sharks. We know who you're tipping. However, same 17 for Canterbury. Bit of consistency there, given you've been going so well. Talakai will back up for Cronulla. Nico Hines obviously was 18th man, but Dal Finucane returns on the bench for the Sharks. But regardless, you're tipping the Bulldogs to win 3 in a row? Is it 3 in a row?
Hopefully.
Oh, good game, this one. 5:30. Cowboys versus Broncos. Saturday up in Townsville. 2 in-form outfits clashing with Valentine Holmes, Murray Talangi and Jeremiah Nanai expected to back up. Jason Taumalolo played 67 minutes for Tonga against the Kiwis and will back up. They get Luciano Leilua into the team for his first game since switching from the West Tigers. It's his 100th NRL match as well. And Adam Reynolds will come back for the Broncos. And Selwyn Cobbo, in some breaking news here on Six Tackle with Gus, has re-signed with Brisbane until the end of 2025 in the lead up to this game. What a good match.
Very nice. Yeah, it is a good game. And it's a real test for the Broncos, who have been playing really well, but to play against home against their, then it's not really a local derby. They're thousands of miles apart, but it's certainly the Queensland derby, isn't it? A very interesting one. Cowboys proved that there is no challenge beyond them at the moment. They've just got so used to winning, they're doing it comfortably, and they play a brand of football which I think will really trouble the Broncos' defensive line. Adam Reynolds back in is a key component there. I'm going to go with little brother in this one, the Cowboy at home.
All right, North Queensland to beat the Broncos up there. 7:35 Saturday night. South Sydney versus Parramatta with Latrell back into South Sydney's side. Is this the start of their run? Cody Nikorima to the bench. Blake Taft to 18th man. Damien Cook is going to back up. I say Cameron Murray should be good to go as well. Jai Arrow is okay. And Junior Polor should back up too for Parramatta. So they're pretty much at full strength, these two teams, for a good game.
Yeah, it will be a really good game too, but I think Earl wins comfortably. That's my tip.
All right. The Warriors are back at home. Mount Smart Stadium, 2 o'clock against the Wests Tigers.
What great scenes. What great scenes with the Warriors returning home for the first time. You know, they haven't played a game in New Zealand since 2019.
It's incredible, isn't it?
And I was very fortunate to get, in my short time there, an understanding of this club, and not only culturally the understanding of the Warriors, but what great people they were, but in the challenges that they faced with this COVID type thing. I'd sort of got on board with them when there was real doubt about when they could go home, if they could go home, and if they went home, what would happen to the competition. And the game worked so hard to accommodate them, and training camps in Tamworth to get around quarantine orders at the time. And now they've lived at Tamworth, they've lived on the Central Coast, they've lived at Brisbane, they've lived at Redcliffe, they've had fellas with kids in and out of 4 or 5 different schools during the time that they've been here, and they've lived in hotel accommodation, apartment accommodation. Now they've rented out homes privately in the Redcliffe, Brisbane area to give some sort of normality to their lives. And they had partners who had children who hadn't yet been home to visit grandparents, and it was such amazing. It's amazing. Like it's all the personal stuff that people don't see. Football-wise, you say, oh, they're training, they're living on the Gold Coast, everything's terrific. It should be okay. And they've made a real fist of it, and they've been competitive. Remember in the early days, they were getting beaten by 50. I can see those visions of at Jubilee Oval when Cameron Smith and Craig Bellamy went into the room after the game. They'd just beaten them by 50 to say, we really appreciate you blokes keep turning up, and gave them a pep talk, and they really have been. They've done a wonderful job. We forget what they're going through personally in their personal lives and what a turmoil it's been. And now they're back in New Zealand. The reception, I can't imagine them not growing a leg with this. And it'll help so much too with the academy program we put in place there, and the recruitment and development of kids, and rugby league in New Zealand, and hopefully the Warriors start playing it in New South Wales. Development pathways in, Harold Matthews, SG Ball, Jersey Flegg, New South Wales Cup, and we get back in where they're helping in the development program, and they have development programs within their own country. But just want to acknowledge what a great sight was to see them back home, and it's going to make so much difference to players and their families and their extended families, and to the club who lost contact with their corporate partners, with their members and with their fans. And it's going to be a big repair job there, but I'm sure they'll get plenty of support for the weekend. And I can't see anything but a Warriors emotional victory this weekend against the Tigers.
And then Sunday footy to round off Beanies for Brain Cancer round. Dragons versus Raiders here on 9. You'll see us live from 3 p.m. Now, Ben Hunt should be okay. Jack Whiten missed Origin with COVID. He'll be fresh and ready to rumble. Josh Papali'i only played 26 minutes after playing 22 minutes in Game 1 for Queensland. Very limited game time for him in the first couple of games. So the Raiders are largely unscathed coming into this.
Yeah, well, both teams are about where I think they deserve to be on the premiership ladder at the moment. Dragons are in the 8, and if they can win this one and Roosters get beaten and Seagulls get beaten and they can beat the Raiders, they jump virtually 4 points clear of their nearest rival for a top 8 finish. So it's a big game for the Dragons at home, who were scintillating against the Rabbitohs. Well, Sam Rabbitohs
Yeah.
were pretty poor, but they were scintillating in the first half. They led them 32-0 at half-time, and then the Rabbitohs beat them 12-0 in the second half. I think if you lead them 32-0 at half-time and then they just win the second half 12-0, you don't threaten the scorer. That's to me, that's a little bit of inconsistency. But we know the Dragons, at their best, can be good. They're 50% win record. The Raiders, too, I think that they're about where they should be at the moment, just outside the 8. But they need to win this one to go up and join the Dragons.
Just before you go on, I just noticed here the Dragons have had a bye. Canberra haven't.
Yeah, they both won 7 games.
Mm.
Yeah, so that's where I think they both should be. One's won 7 of 14, the other one's won 7 of 15. So the Raiders need to win this one to go 50-50, 8 of 16, and the Dragons would be 7 of 15, so they can actually swap places here. So, look, without any confidence whatsoever, the answer is I don't know. It could go either way, and both sides have got their pluses and minuses, and both sides, as I say, the 50-50 record, that's about where they deserve to be at this stage of the season. That's what I've seen from them. It's who picks it up now through the origin period and into the back half of the competition that's going to have the better season. I think Dragon wins for what's that worth, but I'm really looking forward to going down to Wollongong and calling that game on the weekend, right next to the Wollongong Ocean.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Are you calling that Sunday?
I'll be there.
Oh, good.
I'll be there. Might even go for a dip in the Wollongong Ocean before
They've got nice
game.
pies down there.
So, who are you tipping?
I'm tipping Dragon.
Who are you tipping for the week? You've got to go over your tips because people hang on this.
My tips for the weekend.
Multi-punters with Bluebet. This is what they want to hear, what you're tipping.
Okay, I think Sea Eagle can cause the upset. I think Titan, I really think they're good things. I think Panther wins by a lot. Bulldog, I think Cowboy, they've forgotten how to lose. I think Eel, I think Warrior, and I think Dragon.
Okay. Now, do we name the Origin teams on Sunday?
Sunday night, yep.
Do we? Jeez.
Pretty sure.
it's come back around again.
Yeah.
Oh, how good. And
Don't pick your team till the medical's over, mate.
No,
I told you that.
Well, I won't be picking the team at all, but Brad and Billy will. That's Six Tackles with Gus. Thanks very much for your company. Keep an eye out for the Ask Gus on Monday, leading into our podcast each week if you'd like to submit a question, and we will join you across the weekend for the footy here on Nines Wide World Sports.